While creating our components, we have seen a couple of functionalities so far, and one of them was right here in the sign-up page. Here in sign-up page, we use this function to enhance the capability of this sign-up page, and we name this one as higher order component. So we have this with translation, and also there are higher order component functions are coming from the libraries we are using, like the React router also has that, or later we are going to go into the global state management in the application, and we are going to use Redux, and in that one we will see the higher order component as well. But let's practice this one ourselves to understand what are they and when we can use them. Basically, the higher order component is a function, and it is taking a component and returning back a new component. This functionality, this approach is not specific to React. It is a pattern used in programming languages. Now let's practice that. Let's say we want a component to have hover effect when mouse over. We can achieve this one with CSS, but let's try with higher order component. So we are going to create a new function. Generally, the higher order component names are starting with this with keyword. So let's create a function right here, just creating under src. This is a temporary. I'm going to remove them after we complete this part. The module name is with hover.js. And this is a function with hover, and it is going to be taking a component as a parameter. So let's call this one as wrapped component. And as a result, it's going to be returning a new component back. And this can be a functional component or class component. It's up to us. I'm going to return a class. And this is an anonymous class, which is extending component. Let's import component from React, component from React. And this has this render. And in render, we are going to return a JSX and basically just render this wrapped component. And let's make sure we export this with hover from this module. Now let's save this one and let's use it in one of our components, and I will use it in language selector. So here I'm going to import with hover from going one directory up with hover. And we are going to just call with hover, and we will pass language selector. And this is returning a new class. And instead of exporting this language selector, let's export this new class like this. So let's save this one. And if we check the component tree right here, let's collapse this link and route. The language selector is just the element in this router. It's not part of any page. And here we have this language selector, and there is this anonymous class on top of that one. In sign-up page, we are using this higher order component, and when we check the components right here, let's open that route, this one. Here we have the sign-up page, and it has a parent which is also having the same name, but it is saying that this is the translation wrapper. This is the higher order component. So we can do same thing right here. This is going to be indicating there is a wrapper which is extending this language selector functionality. So we can do it like this. The naming is like this. This is a class, and it has a static display name. And in this one, we can use our name our higher order component name with hover, and in parentheses we will be taking the component, this wrapped component name. So we can take it like this, wrapped component display name. If it is not set, we can go with wrapped component name. And if this is not set also, we can go with just component like this. Let's save this one and let's check the components right here. Now we can see this language selector is coming from this with hover. Now in this with hover, we can track if the mouse is on this component or not, and based on that we can set some properties to this one. So like this, let's have a state here, and let's say this is going to be checking if the mouse is on or off, and let's say initially it is off, so the state on is false. And let's wrap this one with div. In this div we are going to track the mouse, so this is going to be calling, there will be two functions, on mouse over, which is going to be calling this set state and setting on to true, and there will be on mouse out, and this is going to be setting on to false, and we will be setting these functions to on mouse over, this on mouse over, and on mouse out, this on mouse out. So this is going to be updating the state whenever mouse is over on this div. Then we can do something like this based on this state. Let's assign a style for this one. So initially, let's say the style will be just an empty object. So that's how we are setting style, setting inline style for elements in React. This is going to be just a JSON object having keys and values, but the keys are just the camel case version of the CSS properties. So like in CSS, the background color is like this, background dash color, but in this one we will be typing it like this. So we will be using camel case for our properties. Now if this state on is true, then let's say the style will be, let's add border, and the border will be 1 pixel solid red. And let's use this style right here. The style attribute, style property will be set to style object we have here. Now saving this one. And if I hover on this part, here we can see there is a border added around this language selector. So if we open once again the developer tools, here the language selector has this state on false, and just follow that part. Whenever the mouse is over, it is set to true, and since it is true, the style is changed and there is this border around this component. Let's use same hover on the sign up page as well. So let's wrap this one right here, wrapping this one. Let's import with hover from with hover on parent directory, and we will be calling with hover right here. This is going to be creating a new component, and let's save this one. And if we hover right here on the sign up page, it is having red border, and if we go to language selector, it is having the red border around it. Now let's check the components, and here we can see there is this with hover wrapping the sign up page as well. When we are implementing a higher order component, we need to pay attention to the properties that the wrapped component is taking. Let's show this one on this language selector right here. Let's say this is going to be taking a property. This is a text, and we are going to be displaying that text right here, props text. Now in app, let's open the app. If we set the prop text like this, text prop is set. So we are setting a property, and if we save this one, we don't see any changes. But let's change this part. Let's, instead of exporting the higher order components version of the language selector, let's just export the language selector. Now the property is visible right here. The prop is received, and we are printing that one onto the screen. But if we use with hover, the text is not visible. And if we check the components right here, now from app point of view, the app is actually using the component that extended with hover, and here in the props we can see that it is receiving this text property and it has this state on. But in actual component we never receive that property, and we can repeat same thing right here in the sign up page. So we are wrapping this sign up page with translation with hover, but let's change their order. Instead of wrapping it with translation first, then wrapping it with hover, let's use with hover before with translation. Let's save this one. Now there's a failure because now we are not able to access to the T function, this translation function. This translation function was being passed to our component by this with translation higher order component, but now there is this with hover in the middle, and we are not able to access to T anymore. So the higher order component we are introducing must be aware that it can be receiving props, and those props are actually targeted to the wrapped component. So we must be passing the properties it is receiving to the wrapped component, and we can do it like this with spread operator. So passing an object, new object, and using spread operator right here, this props. So whatever this props contains is added as property to this wrapped component as well. So let's save this one. Now this is working. The sign up page is working because the translations are fine, and also the language selector is working. And if we check the components right here, the language selector with hover is taking text, and the language selector is also taking the prop text. So when you create higher order component, pay attention to this part. In the sample, we are doing the layout related operation in the higher order component. So we have this div and we changed the style of it, but instead of doing this one, we could just pass a new prop to this component saying that this state value is changed. So instead of like this, let's remove the style part and just removing the style here as well. We can just pass a new prop, and let's say the prop name is on, and let's set the value this state on. Now we can use this one in our component, like for instance in language selector, we can just check the props on value. So let's say we will be using different image sizes. So let's say the size is 24 initially, but if props on is true, then let's change the size to 48. So let's make this one in backticks, writing this one as expression in backticks. We have this URL, and this part is dynamic $ size, and same thing for the GB flag. Saving it, and if I hover on this one here, we can see the flags are now bigger. So basically this with hover is just passing a prop to our component, and we are using that prop to do whatever we need to do about it. And we can do the same thing in signup as well. Now it is receiving a property. Let's check this one right here. Here we are receiving this property, and it is currently false. And if I hover on this form, it is having the on as true. So with higher order components, we are able to extend the functionality of a component. We can use multiple higher order components together in a component to achieve the functionalities we are looking for.